I played the first Space Marine game in 2023 to see if it held up 12 years later. With the release of Space Marine 2, we will see a bump in Warhammer's popularity that we haven't seen in a while. I want this game so bad. So bad. So I want to re-experience the game that got me into Warhammer, playing through the game to find out what's amazing about it and what isn't. I'm looking at you, Leandros. Changes needed for Space Marines 2. And finally, a third section. Only for the hardcore fans, the dirty Xeno lovers out there, the plot armor fanboys, and the Legion of Sigma himself. Let's begin. A Forge world is under attack from an army of orcs, and the Imperium needs results. So they decided to send in Ultramarines. Superhuman warriors with 2 hearts and 3 lungs. You heard me right. If you're new to Warhammer, buckle up, because you're in for a ride. We play as Titus, the actual definition of a Sigma male super soldier, and he has humor. He has stoic one-liners. He has unbridled bloodlust. He has everything a man or woman would seek to become. You have Sidonius, our grumpy best friend, and the third wheel, Leandros.
The Codex Astartes warns against using jump packs to leap blindly into enemy fire, and for good reason.
Okay, you can shove that Codex Astartes up your ass. Landing on the ship, the game does a good job of establishing Space Marines as weapons of mass destruction. You have these tiny little grots that swarm you only to become tiny mists of blood in the way of your knife, or as a normal human would call it, your sword. Big Man is really big. You proceed to murder every orc on the ship and land without a scratch. The main mission, having now landed, is to take out a big anti-air gun that the orcs have commandeered. But there's just a couple orcs in the way. The best part of this game, and a lot of games from this generation, is that it doesn't mess around. In the first 45 minutes, I get a whole game's worth of upgrades thrown at. First, we start off with the iconic bolter. This gun is so famous, it got a whole game named after it. And if you're interested, you might as well watch my review for it right here. It's a solid weapon that feels good, but doesn't have that thud I was hoping for. Just listen to Bolt Gun. Now listen to this. Oh well, doesn't matter when you're exploding orcs with it. Approximately 3 minutes later, you get the second most iconic Space Marine weapon, the Chainsword, which does things like this, and this, and this. Just listen to her purr, it never ever gets old. It's like when they say cartoons and games wouldn't be fun anymore when you got older. But yeah, no, it turns out energy blasts that blow up planets, multiplayer nights with the boys, anime biddies, and chainswords to the gut still hit hard, way past your teens. Did I forget to mention that doing this gives you health? Oh wait, I'm almost out of health. Let me just... This game is as perfect as I remember it being, until Leandros needs to go opening his mouth. Anyways, the last major upgrade for now is Fury Mode, where your melee attacks become more powerful, your health is now able to regenerate, and you get to slow down time when you aim down sight. They clearly want you to have a blast playing this game, because the best part is, this cool new ability regenerates extremely fast. With this trio of abilities, Titus became a whirlwind of death, making his way to the gun fortress. Now this is where you would think the devs would calm down a bit and let you enjoy the power you gained so far. Then 5 seconds later, the orcs are greeted to this. You thought Radahn's entrance was scary in Elden Ring? Just watch Titus repeatedly turn orcs to jello with Super Mario jumps, and you'll be quivering in your boots. I love the jetpack, because you can just spam the ground pound, and the angle at which it lifts off and lands makes it easy to control. The only issue is that every time you slam into the ground, it has this cinematic slowdown, which is no doubt really cool, but jumping up and flying down is by far way faster than Titus's stomp run. So you'll eventually start jumping and slamming your way to the end of the level with slow-mo every time, even without an orc in sight. After turning every orc into red wine, Titus enters the artillery gun and met some very weak orc resistance. Big Boy here almost bludgeoned me to death, but I managed to stun him with a quick time button mash. Oh, how I miss the 2000s with their controller destroying button mash in quick time events. But I'll let you know, I am a weirdo and love myself a good button mash, even if it destroys my expensive Xbox controller. After blowing that orc's mind, we blew the gun to bits.
My battle brothers and I must secure any operational warlord class titans before the orcs can loot them.
Good luck.
Just imagine the look on Titus's face if the orcs claimed the Titan and painted it red and yellow, making it moonwalk over the Forge world faster than ships can fly, then giving it enough power to crack the planet in half. So we boarded the train. The orcs were using it to ram the facility in which the Titan was held. Titus and the team promptly purged all Xenos of life and had to fight this boss thing. Look at me miss! And miss some more. This is one of my issues with the game, and it being a bit old. A lot of the time the aiming just doesn't feel quite right, especially when firing at long distances. I find myself needing to be careful to move the stick just enough only to have an orc jump behind cover until I stop aiming down sight. This is not just an age issue with this game, as there are many third-person shooters by this point that don't have this issue. It may not be huge for now, but when you have orcs that can blow your health bar in half later on, it gets a tad bit annoying. So we finally entered the facility and met up with Inquisitor Deegan, who had recently sent us a video pleading for help.
Mr. Drogan, I need urgent assistance at Manufacturer of a jacket. It's nearly ready.
Well, he's definitely dead.
I am Drogan.
Oh, he's not dead. Turns out he's perfectly fine, and he's definitely not being manipulated by a chaos god or countless other insane tech that can mind control or some sort of bioweapon. We find out he was working on a new technology that is both a fuel source and a weapon.
It is a complex device. It could detonate with enough force to destroy the entire planet.
There is definitely nothing weird about this. Titus promptly manhandles a battery of pure chaos warp energy. Let me say that again. He manhandles a battery of pure chaos warp energy. We leave the crumbled building without a scratch because Titus is confirmed to be built for tough. But I guess I could do with some health. So let me just... We proceeded to meet up with Inquisitor Drogan. But first, I gotta update you guys on the state of my arsenal. The chainsword has already gone out of style for a considerable axe. You can't doubt the effectiveness of spinning around a two-sided axe like a child playing with a sharp pair of scissors. This is only mildly cool compared to the las cannon. I've heard lore YouTubers describe a las cannon before, and it ends up sounding like a giant laser. What's so cool about that? Oh, I missed the memo. This is the coolest shit since countless other cool things I've listed in this video so far. Everything is on point with the las cannon. The fire sound, the recharge sound, the ashes falling from the incinerated enemy with a massive hole in the wall behind them. Then you have its brother, the melt-a-gun. Add this into the mix and oh boy, we are cooking. Literally. I like my orcs well done. Titus meets up with Drogan so that they can take the warp battery off the planet.
You were exposed to the unshielded power source. In the generator room, I saw it. You held raw energy from the warp. How are you still alive?
Well, he is a 9-foot-tall Giga Chad Sigma Ligma male with the personality of Marcus Aurelius and the luck factor of Master Chief. I think Titus can do whatever the hell he pleases.
The power source fuels an experimental weapon at my research facility. The Psychic Scourge. It could destroy the orcs. You didn't think to bring up this Scourge weapon before.
This dude just casually built a weapon that can kill all the orcs and 0 humans. There's no way this could go horribly wrong. You know, it isn't like Xeno factions aren't constantly the fake threat inside of GW stories just to have chaos swoop in and steal the spotlight. There's no way the orcs get screwed over again. But the Mind Scourge is powered by
raw energy from the warp.
We're out of options. We fire the weapon and take our chances.
This is why I like Titus so much. He's genuinely just trying to stop the war as soon as possible and trying to save people's lives, unlike most Space Marines who really could care less about other people unless you're a salamander. We made our way to the Warp Scourge, encountering the only enemy in the whole game that gave me any trouble, the rocket launcher orcs. I cannot describe to you how annoying it is to have an enemy that can hit you from behind cover with a missile that will undo half of your health. Oh shit, I'm low on health. Let me just... Skipping ahead so this video isn't 3 hours long, we go through this insane helicopter fight sequence with Titus shooting orcs out of the sky, off his ship before crash landing. killing more orcs and flying off again. This was the moment I started considering to name my future child Titus. Boy, girl, it doesn't matter. I'm sure my wife won't mind. We make it to the desert level. And the desert level is in fact a desert level. Very brown, very gray, much desert. But, you know, it's a nice switch from the gray and gray most of the game has been so far. At some point, we need to hold back waves of orcs at the gate. And boy, does the combat shine at this moment of the game. Granted, this whole game is roughly 8 hours of pure war, but there are moments when they give you a hammer so big, Sigmar himself would be jealous and just let you swing. This is where you relish that moment. Eventually, about 20 big boy orcs show up to ruin the fun, and the boys call for a tactical retreat. I honestly think they must have got bludgeoned by an orc one too many times, because Titus does what Titus wants. And at this moment, he wants to throw a hammer so hard into the ground and becomes a tactical nuke. So the orcs evaporated and Titus moved on. And finally, we got to the perfectly safe Mind Scourge. We then fired the weapon, and this happened. Gonna be honest, I never saw this coming. So this Chaos Marine dude with the awesome armor and the extension cord coming out of his nose is called Lord Nemeroth. And the next thing you know, Dengen is getting his soul sucked out of his body. Pause. Turns out he was dead the whole time and was a flesh puppet, and we were about to die. I just tried to use his I do as I please powers to resist the warp again.
You seem surprisingly able to resist my touch, Titus of the Ultramarines.
But the orcs aren't ready to give up the spotlight that quickly. So Titus and the squad decided to promptly get the hell out of there. Titus then comes up with a plan on the spot to solve this whole mess. The plan is go to the Warlord Titan from earlier and grab that warp battery and plug it into the Titan. At that point, we will blow the warp gate apart. But while Titus is out here getting things done, being proactive, Leandros, he can only think about one thing, his beloved Codex Astartes.
The Codex Astartes warns that those in league with Chaos can withstand the warp's touch.
Can we get back to the part where we're actually saving the world and killing some orcs? Upon making our way to the Titan, we got a lot of data on how Chaos Marines and Khorne demons deal with big hammers. Not well. Until I arrived at this hellhole, which was filled with orcs, just waves of them, which doesn't seem like a big issue until you see a multitude of missile launcher orcs. You see, Titus currently has a big slow hammer, and while using said big slow hammer, you can only access your bolter, which isn't the best long-range weapon when a big orc threatens to flip you on your head and curb stomp. So as you might guess, even with rage mode, and a big hammer, and heal killing, I died. So you may ask, why not just go back and switch my weapons? Unlucky for me, 360 checkpoints aren't nice, and I was stuck with the hammer. Funny enough, this triggered a deep memory from 12 years ago when I was a kid, when this exact thing happened to me. The key to success was simple for once. All I had to do was not rush in head first and get killed by all the missile launcher orcs. Just take my time. Finally, I made it past them only to be stopped by my old buddy, old pal, Grimskull. Homie said he needed that battery to power his battle modded Honda Civic, and that wasn't going to do. So he yelled wah, and we engaged in a quite enjoyable boss fight, which turned out to be basically the only real boss fight in the whole game, which was a shame. There are plenty of cool chaos demons and orc machines that could have been bosses, but for what it was, Grimskull was a nice change of pace, and the fight gave us yet another stone cold one-liner.
I ain't finished with you yet, Space Marine! But I am finished with you, Orc.
After we climbed on board the Warlord Titan and installed that battery into the cannon, delivering a devastating blow to the warp gate. I would act surprised that Titus stopped a whole invasion in the span of 30 minutes, but it's Sigma Chat Titus we're talking about here. It's time to finish this. Titus sends Sidonius off to the landing pad with the warp battery while he purges some heretic scum. As you may have guessed, this was a bad idea, and while Sidonius is a grumpy old badass, he's not Titus mini Primarch levels of badass.
No!
And what does Lord Nemeroth do?
You continue to resist my touch. Only a deep connection to to the wall can explain this. Will you be joining us soon, brother?
I'm gonna be honest, this may be the weakest sales pitch I've ever seen, and that's coming from a dude who used to be a 19-year-old real estate agent, trying to convince 40-year-old men and women to sell their houses with me, even though I was still living in my parents' basement fresh out of high school. That's how bad Mimaroth's timing was. But then again, we got one of the coldest lines in the game from this moment.
I couldn't reach him in time.
Sidonus died as we all should. In righteous battle. Do not give in to grief, Leandros. Turn your thoughts to vengeance. Nemiroth will pay in blood.
The performance on those lines were immaculate. But it was time for me to fight some heretics, and the first thing that happened was me getting bonked to death. I respawned, and the first thing I did was kill the Chaos Wizard dudes in the back with the trusty las gun and pump the Chaos Marines full of lead. Oh wait, I'm almost out of health. Let me just... We then had a moment to assess the situation and grieve Sidonius. But of course, Leandros opened his mouth and had to ruin everything.
Going alone is suicide. Or worse, we know the enemy takes great interest in your connection to chaos.
Do you fear my falling to chaos?
Of course not.
You're lying!
Oh, I forgot to tell you about this lieutenant. She was delightful and cool throughout the whole game. But this video is already long as hell, and I'm not rewriting that much script to fit her in properly. After scolding Leandros, we fly off to stop Limaroth from becoming a demon prince. The final mission is pretty great, with Titus getting a jetpack and hammer and climbing the spire. So I decided to climb that tower with my signature slam ground pound move and entered the boss arena for Generoth. And what do you think he had to say to Titus?
Imagine the Ultramarines dominating this galaxy in glorious conquest with you at their head. Imagine the power you could wield. As a slave to chaos.
Now we're at the final battle, and Sephiroth is turning into a half-demon prince. So, what kind of crazy last final encounter do they have planned for us? Maybe new enemies, crazy boss fight, waves and waves and waves of enemies? Nah, it was like 3 moderate waves of demons, and that was about it. But that's okay, because for sure we're gonna get a crazy boss fight with Nemiroth. We're gonna figure out, how does Titus fight someone he couldn't even stand up against? What kind of crazy boss fight and crazy mechanic is about to happen with Titus now? Actually, no, there's no cool boss fight or anything insane like that. Titus just walks over, shoves Nemiroth over the edge while he's admiring his new glow up, and that's it. I know it's kind of disappointing that there's no big boss fight. And how does Titus even stand up against Nemiroth? I don't know, but all can be forgiven, because look at this cinematic final battle. He crushed his skull mid-air with his bare hands. Give this dude a squadron. You know what? Give him a whole chapter of Marines. He deserves it.
Captain Titus has been corrupted by Chaos, Inquisitor Thrax.
Leandros among us is Titus, naming him imposter. Wait, I mean the heretic. Even though there are definitely space marines called fucking psychers and Grey Knights exist, so how the fuck? Oh, Leandros is not gonna like that. Thus, the game ends on this cliffhanger. And many of us never thought we'd get to see Titus beat some cheeks ever again. We were wrong. Before we revel in the glory of Space Marines 2, let me first summarize all the things I didn't like about the original Space Marines game. A lot of this game is great, and that is because of the era of gaming, but that doesn't change the fact that it is great. The middle of the game can feel repetitive, but I also binge played the game in one 8-hour-long session, so take that with a grain of salt. The aiming could be wonky and slow when dealing with ranged enemies. Lastly, this dude. But aside from that, I not only liked but loved everything else about the game. The ungodly levels of gore mixed with the third-person shooting and melee combat. The world was phenomenally on point, representing the Warhammer universe well. And the story was surprisingly fun, with enjoyable side characters, a meme-level hateable character, and the God Emperor reincarnate himself, Titus. This game holds up so well as an action-packed weekend game. I had more fun playing Space Marine 1 than this new painful game. Now that I've spent 8 hours replaying Space Marines, I am now the foremost expert on the topic of games called Space Marine. So let's take a look at Space Marine 2, my most anticipated game by far for 2024. First, let's talk about the good news.
And Titus is back, let's fucking go!
Let all the fireworks loose and let's rejoice. Hopefully we'll get to know what the Inquisitorum did to Titus and why he was D-ranked even though he saved a whole Forge world. But most of all, we need some information on why Titus was resistant to the warp. The cherry on top of all of this would be if Titus gained some light psyker abilities. Honestly, I don't know if it works with the lore, but I know it would make for some great gameplay, so I don't really care. And the cherry on top of that cherry is the fact that he will be purging another world of my favorite Warhammer faction, the Tyranids. Now, the orcs were funny and fun to fight, but the Tyranids, from a gameplay perspective, there is so much depth to them. You have some Cthulhu-looking weirdos next to that big brain-looking weirdo that's... Wait, hold up. Is that a dragon? I didn't know they were chill like that. But honestly, they have so many models to be basic enemies like the Termagants, and many models to be mini bosses like the Death Leaper. There are also obvious bosses with the Hive Tyrants. Then to cap off the campaign, you could end with fighting a Norn emissary. This is just the tip of the iceberg with the enemy variety. Do I believe we will see all different forms of Tyranids? Sadly, no, but if we even get 50% of it, we are in for a treat. It won't matter though, because yet again, the Xenos are gonna get cucked by Chaos. But at least they're getting cucked by Tzeentch, my favorite Chaos god. Graphically, the game looks gorgeous in its own chainsword to the intestine sort of way. And the gameplay looks very similar to the old game, which is great, but a little worrying in some ways. While the parry is new, I really hope they invest in giving Titus a larger arsenal of weapons and have more enemy diversity, like I said earlier, because even as short as the campaign was, it did get a little bit repetitive in the middle there. And I'm hoping for at least a 12 to 15 hour gameplay experience, especially since we get 3-player co-op. You heard me right. You get to run around with the boys, or in my case, your fiance, as Space Marines. Watching my friends and I run into a Tyranid swarm, chain swords in hand, it'll bring a tear to my eye. Honestly, I'm pretty sure me and my dad will play this game like 15 times if it's any good. This isn't even including the fact that they're bringing back PvP multiplayer. I'm sure it's going to be unbalanced as all fuck, but sometimes that's the fun in games like this. Also, side note, I saw that it got posted that they confirmed PvP, then it got taken down and deleted, so I guess we'll see if maybe they don't have time for that, if it's not polished enough. Well, let's just hope that we get multiplayer. Having crazy weapons that should not be allowed online, then steamrolling the other team before they inevitably team up and take the weapon away from you like an angry child and retaliate is peak late night game. But I praised this game long enough. It's time to go over my main worry, replayability. I am worried that this game will both be short and that the other difficulty modes won't offer anything more than more damage from the enemies. I don't want the difference from normal to hard in this game to just be, wow, these Termagants take a little bit too long to kill, and that Tyranid warrior over there, he just one-shot me. I want them to go the extra distance and place different enemies in different areas. Maybe a zone that was swarming with Termagants now has Gene Stealers shooting at me. Just something to give the game a fresh feel. And that's pretty much it. I know, I'm a Space Marine simp, but honestly, I think they're taking the game pretty seriously. I just don't want it to be short, and I don't want to have to wait another 35 years for a new game. With so much going on in the Warhammer universe in general, I think they really want this to be a great entry point for gamers to immerse themselves in this bright and cheerful universe. If you made it this far, you are a next level gamer, nerd, and Sigmar Chad Sigma like me, which probably means that you've seen the huge changes in Warhammer. We've got 10th edition, a new point to onboard new players. Along with this, we have the new Leviathan starter boxes, which contain Space Marines facing off against new Tyranid models. Then you have their biggest video game to date, with the Space Marines also facing off against a great Tyranid threat, along with the Games Workshop website and other things getting updated. I honestly never expected this level of synchronization from Games Workshop, trying to at least thematically make the onboarding process for new players as easy as possible. Will this succeed? I have no idea. GW has a knack for pissing off the community royally. Just look at the end times. They blew up a whole game just because the sales were bad and they wanted to rebrand. While they have made some mistakes. Okay, a lot of mistakes, and the hobby is still very expensive to get into. I believe GW is going to at least try to take Warhammer to the next level with Magic the Gathering crossover decks, big new video games, and some great skirmish modes to get new players in, along with Henry Cavill producing the cinematic universe in collaboration with Amazon. I think they're really pushing to grow the fan base. So I'm going to be making more Warhammer content because I want to get more involved in the community and in the games. Plus, I think Age of Sigmar gets the shaft, and I'm here to help represent the fantasy side of Warhammer. As many jokes as I've made in this video, I am still very new to Warhammer. My wife and I have bought our first box of minis ever, and all I've done is watch ungodly amounts of lore videos. So please stick around as I shit talk more games, discover lore with fresh eyes, and paint my Stormcast Eternals with crayons.